Our ability to communicate with each other telepathically is improving. This impacts all of our relationships, but today we're going to explore the impact of telepathy between parents and their children. Lee Degani is a dynamic teacher, spiritual counselor, and healer. She and her husband work with children to see beyond this realm by practicing their supernatural gifts. Today we're talking about communicating with our children on a telepathic level. And Lee is back with us. And Lee, I love this topic. I love talking about telepathy in general because general communication, there's so many issues with it. I'm in the communication business, right? And I see this all the time. Like, I thought I said this to this person and they took it this way or whatever. So I'm so excited for our whole planet to do more things telepathically. And I think one of the great things we can do as parents and caregivers is to practice this with our kids. So how do we do this? Let's talk a little bit more about it.
Absolutely. I love that that's one of your goals. And I hope that many parents have that same goal. But, we hear frequently that children are speaking much later than they ever used to. And that doesn't mean that they're not communicating. They're doing so telepathically. And, I see this with my own grandchild. I mean, he's speaking, but he's 3.5. And I can be thinking of something. And a few minutes later, he'll repeat what I am thinking about. And I didn't say anything about it, but that's a form of telepathic communication. So we're all born with it. It's like our birthright. It's just that if it's not encouraged and not used, just like so many of our abilities, that we lose it. And I had a child who's on the spectrum, nonverbal, that I worked with years ago. And the mother asked that my husband and I would come in and work with this child. And of course, he wasn't going to put on the blindfold with our program or anything. But how did I reach him? I spoke to him telepathically. And he had a lot of shifts after that. And another thing that happened was that the mother just needed validation that she was doing that. And we tested it out. And sure enough, she went into her heart, because that's the first place we go when we want to communicate telepathically. The heart is a portal for that. And she connected with him and she said, would you please go get me an ice cream from the freezer? And sure enough, he did. So this is something that we need to all have in our toolbox. And so how do we practice it? Well, we start practicing. There's a beautiful story of one of my students. She was 12 at the time, and she had a sister that was 13. And they lost their fur baby, a beautiful boxer. And the whole family was so devastated. And she came to me, she was in my school, and she said, could you help me with this? She was already working with the light, so she understood that she could receive help. Okay. And so we sent a message to her dog, and she was filled with such peace. And you hear a lot of times about people communicating with animals. It's the same kind of thing. It's a form of telepathy. Mm-hmm. And so the way that she had to do that was she went into her heart and she felt the feeling of how much love she had for her dog. Mm. And she put a picture of herself in like a heart, in her screen, in her mind, the way they do with the infinite light vision. And she sent it. And that's the peace that came back. And I felt that peace too. And I said, I don't want to leave this space. And I said, let's see if we can get a further message. So she sent a further message asking a question, do you have anything else to tell me? And she said, I'm seeing a heart and there's an R in it. And she was used to reading with her infinite light vision. So she said, for some reason, I'm not seeing the rest of the letters. I'm only seeing the R. Mm-hmm. And I said to her, the R is for Rocky. That was the name of her dog.
Oh,
Yeah. So a lot of times I have the kids begin with telepathic communication by communicating with their animals. And
mm.
that's such a fun way because there's no right or wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
Or communicate with a tree,
Uh-huh.
and it's just going into your heart and sending a message. It's always good to send a message that has a feeling or emotion attached to it and a
Mhm.
picture in your mind.
Yeah.
And yes, another way is to send messages of love to our loved ones and see how they respond.
Yeah, that's true. I think about all the things that parents are taught nowadays, like, I don't know, baby sign language. Have you heard of like baby signing?
Absolutely.
And not that there's anything wrong with that, but we're already trying. We realize that there's a lack. There's a lack. It's like we intuitively know we should be able to communicate with our babies. But I feel like we're going about it in all these different directions where, sometimes it's the path of least resistance. And in this case, just sending love to your baby and being able to connect. There's so many things I wish I knew as my kids were, little babies. I was like, what do you want? But I feel like this is such a great skill. We kind of have to relearn it a little bit, but such a great skill for that bonding between mother and especially children at a young age.
Absolutely.